Welcome to Slash Forward. Do you remember when Jeff Goldblum got Gina Davis pregnant? Anyway, it was for a role and it resulted in the birth of Martin Brundle, a young boy who grows up fast and seems destined to follow in his father's footsteps of experimenting with some pods. But what are the pods even for anymore? And can he focus despite the hyperactivity brought on by the fly half of his DNA? Why are flies smart, strong, and fast runners? We'll dig into that, starting with a cursory glance at the story to flag any potential clues. Let's get to it. We open at Bartok Industries, where a helicopter buzzes overhead to arrive at the site of a very active labor.
Something's wrong, goddammit.
You think? Stathis is escorted out as Mr. Bartok himself is escorted in. He likes to be present at all of his experimental mutant births. He stares on emotionlessly as the doctors welcome a beautiful baby chrysalis into the world. As they clean and tend to Veronica's leavings, things get a bit surreal in the OR. This prompts her to go ahead and check out of reality for good. The surgeons then gently open the bubbling carapace to extract the bouncing baby boy. Naturally, what comes next is the executive meeting to discuss child rearing, in which Bartok asks his lead scientist, Dr. Janeway, to raise little Marty Brundle as she would his son, if she were tasked with raising Mr. Bartok's biological son, for some reason, if he had one. In the lab, we see Martin's life cycle at 11 months old is significantly accelerated. Also, he has a photographic memory and never sleeps, so that's something. On the negative, he's kind of whiny when it comes to getting his daily checkups, so he does not appreciate good health care.
I think it's time our young guest and I became acquainted.
Ah yes, the traditional meeting of the father that traditionally happens in the 11th month of life. He tries to charm him up, but behind those inquisitive eyes, it's clear that he's just taken notes about the ethics of manipulating people. As he gets older, much to Dr. Shepard's disdain, he develops a lack of seriousness due to the simplicity of their childish tests. He'd rather build unnecessarily elaborate headgear that provides tools for every occasion. They continue poking and prodding him as he longs for Mr. Bartok to visit him, rather than spending all his time in stupid old Zone 4. So, as he gets the shot he depends on to continue living, he tucks Shepard's credentials away in his mind in order to use them later to grant himself Zone 4 access. He brings his helmet just in case, and ventures out via the comfortably roomy air ducts until he reaches the entrance to Zone 4. The key is, you just gotta act like you belong there. Here, he communes with his brethren before exploring deeper, eventually stumbling upon the animal testing room. He finds a friend, and through his one-way conversation, we learn he was told that he has a rare condition that makes him age quickly, and was shared by only one other person, his biological father. Sometime later, we see Martin palming his lamb chops as a special treat for his secret friend. But when he finds the cage, it's been tagged with a notice that the specimen has been moved. His thirst for knowledge compels him to waltz right up to the window to see what up. But we know what up. These science turds are trying to teleport ya boy. A high price, but they are trying to revolutionize short-range personal transportation. They're having a hard time recreating Seth Brundle's work, so much so that, in this case, just coming out alive is considered a good first step, even at the cost of one scientist. When Martin makes his presence known, Bartok comforts him as a father, giving him priority over the massive workers' comp claim unfolding below. We meet up with Martin again as a strapping young lad of 5, possibly using his wish to put an end to his hyperpuberty. As a special gift, Bartok grants him the privilege of privacy. Mirror be damned! He's now the proud occupant of a sweet bachelor pad with track lights, a sunken living room, a Celestron 127, everything a young boy needs other than a race car bed.
No more mirrors, no more prying eyes.
Finally, he can cook naked. Now indebted to Daddy, Bartok uses this as leverage to convince him to take on a very challenging job at the company. He's hoping Martin can utilize his superior intellect to turn these pods into something more than an expensive applesauce machine. But the dog weighs heavily upon him, so Bartok emphasizes that the genetic reconstruction will do tremendous good for humanity, that he can go about doing the work in any way he'd like, and with reassurances that the good boy didn't suffer long. Just in case he needs more convincing, he's provided a tape that allows him to gaze upon his magnificent father. The end result? Martin decides this is a nut he'd love to crack. Attempt 1 goes surprisingly well, except when he tests the phone, it calls the devil. Now, he desires organics to test. He goes off in search as security looks on in contempt, hating him for having the audacity to exist. In the records room, a curious sight leads him to a chance encounter with Beth Logan. She teaches him about fishing lures and about career death as she toils away at night shift records filing. Luckily for her, she's got what he desires, organic material. In barter for her succulent, he invites her to come to see the most transformative technological event in human history. She happens to be just bored enough to come take a look. She barely has a chance to take it all in before Martin goes zapping her cactus around, and he very nearly gets it. Then what are you tapping there? And gets back to her filing. Martin decides to shoot his shot here and invite her back for another visit.
I would like us to be friends.
Friend-zoning himself to protect against any future embarrassment. Of course, nothing good ever happens without old Scorby there to take you down a peg. Martin is overjoyed about his new social development, but Janeway is growing increasingly frustrated about the direction of the project. It happens, but how about a little professionalism, please? This is inconsequential as he's floating on a cloud of sexual awakening as he and Beth fill their evenings working, in dereliction of the duties she's actually getting paid for, and montaging like crazy through some of them sweet and sultry country sounds.
Lost dog and teardrops.
What a bold choice. At the end of all of this, Beth invites him to his first social gathering. It's universally agreed that his boyish good looks are sexy as hell, but he's most comfortable as a fly on the wall, where he overhears some colleagues make reference to an impressive test subject that's been going strong for 2 years now. His natural curiosity leads him to the dank testing pit, where some gruel is carefully slid out and subsequently gobbled down by his poor doggo, suffering immeasurably after all this time. For some reason, Martin revokes Beth's clearance and ends their friendship. He returns later to an old friend who remembers their tender moments, and he soothes the pitiful beast while helping to release him from this world of suffering. The next day, Martin goes in for a quick tannin scan and is confronted by his corporate daddy, who inquires about an incident in the specimen lab. Martin lies his way through this, which they find delightful. Later on, Beth finds Martin desires to make amends, so she meets him out by the pods. You see, he likes feeling wanted. He also likes demonstrating his advanced problem-solving skills by making her culpable for the kitty's fate, but revealing a perfectly fit and healthy kitty. He found success when he restarted the program from scratch, finding his way on his own by following the path of beauty and aesthetics. Overcome with the emotion of this tremendous success, Beth straight up makes love to a 5-year-old. In the afterglow, Beth sensually removes his bandage to reveal a pus-filled surprise. Then she gives him one to remember her by. When he gets into the office, Martin begins asking his bespoke AI if it's possible to modify his own DNA to fix his aberrant mutation. It's doable, but only with a sacrificial source of genetic materials. This is unethical, to be sure, but his wound is getting awfully gooey. He's upset that they're trying to pass it off as a simple infection. Realizing he's too smart for that, Janeway confirms his metamorphosis has been underway for some time now, and it's spreading like wildfire. As a result, Bartok authorizes initiation of the Delta Protocol. When Beth arrives for her shift, her card don't work. It's revealed that she's been promoted to a position that's based out of a building across town. She's notified of this HR change suddenly and by the head of security, as is standard procedure. Scorby gives her a little parting gift to convince her not to make a fuss about it. While working, Martin has a hard time getting an outside line, and Beth is told by the company operator that Martin Brundle doesn't exist. But Marty patches his way through and makes successful contact with Beth. She reveals that they were filmed doing it by Bartok, so a different angle than they were using. This results in a massive hissy fit. He rejects Papa's gift as the surveillance boys look on uncomfortably. He continues his rampage until finally discovering he was betrayed by Harmon Kardon. Now the twins decide to call it in. Father is not pleased, but Martin don't care. He wants to see the tapes and know the truth. He finds that their vision runs deep. He learns that Biodad didn't have a disease. His affliction was caused by the pods. Bartok acts like he's happy Martin knows now because he didn't want to keep secrets anyway. His condition is unstoppable and the injections have been a placebo this entire time. They wanted him to transform and to unlock the power of genetic sluicing. Martin then puts his fly power to use. 42 skidooing his ass under the gates and showing Scorby what it means to truly be a flyboy. He then dashes off into the night, as a fly would. Scorby goes back looking like an absolute tool, and Bartok has no kind words for him. He then meets up with his lab lads to see what kind of juicy fun they can get up to with their functional pods. But with total autonomy, Martin went ahead and booby-trapped his software, leading to an followed by a
Clever boy.
So suck it, Spielberg.
There's a real magic word, and only Martin knows what it is.
Yeah, that's what a password is. Meanwhile, Martin jumps around the docks and welcomes himself onto Beth's houseboat. She finds him looking like he rubbed shellfish all over his grill, and he shares with her the bad news. Her child lover was also biologically a fly. By the time Scorby shows up with the wrecking crew, they're both long gone. Time is limited, but luckily security guards don't need warrants. It's all breaking and entering for them. Beth drives Martin out to the insect sanctuary she grew up on, and they meet Stethosborans. The man Seth Brundle puked all over. He comes out for a moment just to take a peek, but Martin really needs to have a word with him. He wants to know if Stathis knew anything about the cure his father was working on, but the only attempt he made involved dragging his mother into the pod as a genetic sacrifice, the same as what Martin came up with. So where does that leave them? And totally D'd over, but with a new set of wheels. They dip into an out-of-the-way motel and seek out a non-smoking room for health purposes. When she returns to the car, Martin is hobbling out into a field, scared of an uncertain future. Yeah, join the club, bro. Beth wakes up later to Martin mumbling to himself. He's in the end stages and suggests she leave him be, as he's now beginning to feel his strength and improvement from his prior sickly form. This is just who he is now, Beth, a man with no eyes. She takes him up on his suggestion, but also has no idea what to do next. So she calls Bartok for help. They provide it by helicoptering in and snagging him. Unfortunately for them, he falls into stasis without revealing his password. By the time they get back, he's now in the second chrysalis stage of his development. They welcome him with excitement and try to provide a calm and comfortable environment so he can focus on growing. Elsewhere, after a good hose down, they bring Beth in to try to help decode the magic word. In the lab, the heart rate becomes elevated, prompting Janeway to take a closer look. Things seem to still be active, so she siphons off some fluid for further testing. But we're kind of past that now. She comes to discover that Martin Brundle has been born anew and is in a bit of a murdery mood. Shepard finds the messy aftermath and escapes to the stairwell where he puts Scorby on the case. Security then reconvenes at the pods, where the first step is to put Beth in a safety headlock before putting the call out to catch Martin, but not to damage him. They get him cornered in the boiler room and send in the Roddy, but they really don't know what they're dealing with. A giant beast and true lover of dogs, and he escapes into the shaft. For some reason, Dr. Shepard didn't immediately run to his car, and after dropping his collection of Trapper Keepers, he pays dearly for this bad decision. They catch this on the cameras and note that it's heading directly for them, so they seal the doors and wait. When Shepard's car doesn't work, he still puts him to good use. Despite all of that, Roger has never actually shot his gun, so he ventures out into the fray like he's Tango and/or Cash. Right when he thinks the danger is past, he gets foamed up, which sounds like a party, but absolutely is not. They try to get authorization to kill on sight, but Bartok can't imagine putting the last 5 years to waste. Martin then puts them on auxiliary power and finds a point of ingress using his go-to strategy of duct play. Seeing what they're seeing, Scorby gives himself authorization as he's forced to watch his buddy get tossed under a lowering elevator. He is only able to slowly escape far enough to ensure everyone sees his dome get crushed like a pumpkin. Scorby then blows his load on nothing before cornering himself inside a cage where he gets locked down and spat upon. Good job, Scorbs! As they try to cut in from the outside, he manages to get free and shoot at anything that moves other than Martin, who ends up jumping out and folding him in half the hard way. Now ready for lethal force, Bartok pulls out Scorby's standard issue nickel-plated Desert Eagle. He puts 2 slugs in Martin, but when he moves in for the kill shot, finds that he was just luring him in. He uses Bartok's pudgy fingers to input the simplest password ever, before using him again to fix his genetic code by dragging him, kicking and screaming, into the pod. Beth eventually gets what's going on here. And too late, it's done. What emerges are a pair of horrifyingly disfigured, sloppy, wet meat sacks. This is who Bartok is now. But Martin hatches safely from his anal sac looking like $1 million after his stem cell bath. They had to rehire their entire staff, but apparently put some other shithead in charge, because Bartok, who actually looks like a Bartok now, is in the specimen pit to be studied indefinitely. I think this film takes a lot for granted by being the sequel to an all-time classic that is printed upon the cultural subconscious. What I mean by that is, when I was going back to think about what may not have been made clear, I recognized that there are some major plot points that were laid out in a fairly awkward manner. Not everything needs to be explicitly stated, but there are sometimes major pieces of information that cannot be gleaned through subtext. For instance, it's mentioned that Martin's condition caused advanced aging, and he shared that condition with his dad, but it's never mentioned that he knew becoming a fly was part of that. However, when Janeway reveals it during his final checkup, it's not a surprising revelation that he's beginning a metamorphosis. This gives the impression that since they're making a movie with a known inevitable outcome that's already in everyone's minds, they get to that point in the plot without ever putting the requisite scenes in the movie. However, it's hardly noticeable because we all know what's going to happen. The scene where Seth talks about his pod experience is a deleted scene from the original movie. He mentions how he should have come out exactly as he went in, but he didn't. He felt like he was changed and improved in some way. This was the impetus for them attempting to recreate his work. It's not completely clear whether the sole purpose of doing so was to try to mix some stuff up and see what comes out, or to improve human biology, or to also use them as medical equipment. But it seems like getting them to work as a means of restructuring DNA to cure people of genetic ailments would be pretty profitable. And to my previous point, if it was known that the fact that this improvement was derived from recombining DNA with a fly, Martin would likely have been unconvinced by the tape. Given the nature of how they glossed over many things due to already having a strong underlying framework from the original, there are a lot of elements of this film that could be questioned. However, I'm going to stick to just a couple overarching themes here. The first thing is how they shot the final scene. They're in a big room with some catwalks and Martin is a giant creature now. They all seem to be standing in a single central location, but Martin passes through and interacts with Beth. However, his location is still a mystery to the others, until it's not. It was a bit messy in the framing and editing and made it difficult to follow the action. More broadly, if you want to portray your character as super smart, but you're not sure how to write that consistently, you have to leave a little bit to the imagination. The memory maze was pretty impressive, but this helmet? Does he have a 3D printer or a CNC machine or something? How did he fabricate these parts? But also, why? This is a whole lot of nothing from one eye of magnification and a water gun. And also, nose guard, why? And then security was asleep, but he went through the ducts anyway, but then came back out? And just please, cut from one location to the next so we, the audience, can keep pretending with you. But one gaping hole you maybe shouldn't have cut is the denouement for our actual main characters. They're now jobless and on their own. Martin is a 5-year-old orphan with no social security number and only 2 weeks of work history on his resume. Was this a happy ending? Because Bartok got his, but Martin killed a lot of people in cold blood. Although I suppose it would be reasonable to presume that a person is not liable for the damage and harm committed while a fly. But speaking of damage, practical effects, come and find me. For a watered-down rehash of a classic, they did not phone it in on the gruesome scenes. And it's not just that they showed a lot, which they did. It's that they showed a lot, it was well done, but also obviously creative and thoughtful in what they were trying to do. For instance, old Roger gets his face and hands melted off. An absolutely brutal depiction. But to add to it, when his secure bros show up, your boy's still breathing on the ground. He's still alive for an extended period of time afterward. There's a classic head crush. Dr. Shepard getting thrown at the door was inspired, and it just goes on and on. That was one thing they definitely got right. Regardless of what you think about the rest of the movie, they put some thought and care into these parts, and it actually plays as some of the most impactful portions of the movie. I think partly because they really got the eyes right. Bartok in the end was truly stunning. This eye, you really feel pity for that old scumbag, and it's evocative of a bottomless well of desperation and suffering. But outside of that, it's a fairly average film overall. If there was no context from the first movie, I wonder if the script would make any sense at all. I did enjoy it. Some of its eccentricities are what lent charm to movies from the 80s. If it had come out 5 years later, it would have been draped in black tulle with the company based in a gothic building in the middle of a grungy city with an industrial prog rock soundtrack. I'm sorry, but you cannot groove like this to that. And you need that innocence to offset Martin's murderous rampage. It is otherwise very cool, but empty. It follows Martin's life, but isn't really about anything, which isn't a problem, except they tried to shoehorn some philosophy about rebirth in at the end. However, this wasn't a theme that he ever examined before. His motivations were actually somewhat unexplored otherwise, so it lacks that Cronenberg edge, but otherwise delivers a solid entry to the genre and is a decent movie for a washed-out sequel. If they had done the same thing, made it a little more of a love story, and cut out the gore, there would really be no reason to watch it. As a final precaution, if you couldn't tell from the recap, this is probably one of the most protracted and emotionally devastating dog deaths there's probably ever been. So keep that in mind if you want to try this one out. Now that we're here, I wanted to congratulate you for making it to the end of the video and affirm that you are a very special person because of it. And before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors, memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks a growing collection of uncensored movie recaps. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.